So what is a beginner's mind? It's openness and wonder that allows us to approach life free of preconceived ideas, free of habits and bias. It's an acknowledgement of impermanence, a willingness to experience whatever comes forward without trying to control it or categorize it. It takes courage to surrender to the flow of life. And it's something that everyone in this room has experienced. It's just an ordinary experience. What was it for you? Finger painting as a kid, feeling the thickness of the paint and smearing it on the paper and being amazed to see the colors trailing your hands. Perhaps there was a moment when you became so absorbed by beauty that you just were immersed totally in it. No separateness, no voice of you should or should not be doing something. No one versus two. It's not knowing. It's resting in that not knowing with openness to learn, cultivating curiosity and being fully engaged. An ordinary experience. And yet, it's hard. It can be very challenging. Things come up. Being an adult beginner can be hard. We have expectations of how we should go about something. The critical mind, the inner critic comes up saying you should be doing this, you should be further, that's not good enough. We're used to feeling competent. We have some skills, and now all of a sudden we're outside of our skill set and it feels really uncomfortable. And we're not in control. What is it that pulls us out of that flow of that open, curious mind state? What takes us out of beginner's mind? It's worth looking into. Why do we doubt and criticize and close up on ourselves? Why do we become uneasy and stressed and unhappy, dissatisfied? Why do we suffer? This was a question the Buddha asked himself too. Why do we suffer? Why do I suffer? Why do people suffer? Why are we unhappy? And what can we do about it? The Buddha's observations on human nature and his insights into the human condition are taught in the Four Noble Truths. There are many versions available. They usually are something like this. Life inevitably contains suffering. This suffering is caused by craving and clinging to impermanent things. Suffering can be ended by cutting the roots of craving, and this can be achieved by following the path outlined by the Buddha, the Eightfold Path. Suffering, cause of suffering, end of suffering, path. Here's a little historical aside before I go any further, because I just said the Buddha said. It's thought that he gave his teachings on the Four Noble Truths about 500 years before the Common Era. so 2,600 years ago. And they were passed down by word of mouth for about 300 years before they were finally written down. So, of course, we can't know exactly what the Buddha said. But these texts, they were written down in the Pali language, so the texts are often called the Pali Canon. And these are the closest to what we have that he may have probably said. Perhaps ultimately the test is trying them out for yourself and seeing if they bear fruit, and then choosing to believe it or not believe it from there. But back on track. Dukkha is the Pali word which is often translated as suffering, but it can also be translated as stress or dis-ease or unhappiness or dissatisfaction. What is really wonderful about the writings in the Pali Canon on the Four Noble Truths is that they not only include the part that I just read to you, the 4 points, but they also include the Buddha's advice on how to work with each of those truths. How to work with each of those observations he made about our nature. So when you read the Pali Canon, it's like kind of like a little poem, but he begins by defining terms. He was apparently a logical guy. So he defines dukkha, or suffering, and he talks about it growing out of 3 main areas. So one is the kind of suffering that is from pain or sickness or grief, despair. This is what we're very familiar with. Another type of suffering grows out of our difficulty believing that impermanence actually exists, that it's real. We want to not believe that. And then another kind of suffering happens. It turns out like this organism is like a sensory interpreting machine. So there's all these sensations coming at me, and my body, brain interprets them and makes sense of them for me. And when I have this basic mistake and believe that there's a constant solid me in here that's doing the interpreting, that mistake propagates suffering as well. So that's another one of the categories that he talks about for suffering, for dukkha. But he goes on, this is where it gets so good. He talks about a prescription for how to deal with this. And the advice he gives us on working with the noble truth, or this observation that human life includes this dukkha, this suffering, is that it should be understood. Dukkha should be understood. I'm going to go on a slight tangent, but I promise I'm going to get back. I've had the fortune in my life of being around many classical guitarists. And they have the ability to make this rich and luscious tone by striking the string of the guitar. And they do it by touching it both with the pad of their finger and their fingernail. If you ever get around a group of classical guitarists, they will start talking about dissecting in meticulous detail how each finger strikes the string. And they know, based on their own hand position and the strings, the exact angle where each finger touches the string, and it's different on each hand. And so they file their nails at a slightly different angle on each finger so that as it touches the string, it touches it in the perfect way to help facilitate this sound. And not only that, they then take 600 grade sandpaper and sand each fingernail so that there's no friction whatsoever. They will talk about this for hours. It's this kind of meticulous detail that we can bring to understanding dukkha, to understanding our experience of suffering. Noticing if it's present or absent. Noticing it's arising or it's passing away. Noticing the flavor of it or the intensity of it. If it's taking your whole being or if it's just in a tiny corner of it. I play a game. I'm admitting. I play this game. I'm driving in the car, I have a thought, and I think, is this dukkha? And then look, it's like, in this situation right now, is what I'm feeling, is this what he's talking about? Because sometimes it's huge and obvious, like the overwhelming grief associated with death. But sometimes it's very subtle, just the tiniest annoyance, or maybe even just the way the mind state of compression or repetitive thinking is a certain thought stream. Is that dukkha? Notice that this advice does not say to understand dukkha by pushing it away or by not thinking about it, which for me and for many is the first impulse when something uncomfortable happens. Suffering is something we usually don't want to get to know in meticulous detail. We want to be rid of it. But to really know dukkha, we have to be willing to experience it fully throughout the whole cycle, arising, abiding, ceasing, gone. Do you believe that? Is it just some words, or do you believe it? Like, are you willing to really look? He goes on to advise that dukkha must be fully penetrated by understanding dukkha. And then he asks us to complete this circle. So you observe something, and then you practice it, but then acknowledge, look at what you have done. There's 3 parts to it, right? You want to see what needs to be done, you work at it, and then you see, what was that like? Kind of review. What was that like for me? What could I learn? What did I learn from that? What was different? What was surprising? Finish it by looking back. This noble truth has been penetrated by fully understanding suffering. And then he gives us a roadmap of how this process unfolds, presumably how it was for him personally. So often when reading the Pali Canon, it seems like it's just a bunch of repetitive words, but really they're sharing a mind state that we can learn from and emulate. He says, such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing, and light that arose in me about things not heard before. What does it feel when insight arises in you? How is that? For me, it's often associated with the word, oh. It's a surprise. It's like it comes from completely nowhere. Who knows? And then all of a sudden it's there, and I see, I can realize something. Oh. And it's often different than I thought it would be. It's often a surprise. The Buddha is asking us to keep looking, to observe from different angles, to ponder, to notice, to fully and openly experience until insight arises. And then recognize that, celebrate that, integrate that into life, into how we meet the world. The next observation, the second truth, the second noble truth, states that there is an origin to suffering. That's interesting. But what's more interesting, as he says, that it is clinging or grasping, attachment, and that there are three kinds of this attachment. There's the I want more, there's I don't want any, I don't want it, and then there's I want to become I want to become that. So I want a chocolate cupcake. I've had too many, I don't want them. I want to become a chef who everyone loves for making chocolate cupcakes. We can bring that same meticulous attention to clinging and grasping as we did to dukkha. We can become familiar with the feeling of craving and clinging when it takes hold of us, and recognize it and be aware of its happening. And we can explore, is it true even that all suffering has clinging associated with it? And that's sort of interesting. So when I feel myself grasping, then I like, is there dukkha here too? Is that like, what's that feel like? Or if I'm feeling unhappy, I might go the other way and think, is there behind all of this clinging and grasping? Because the teaching is that they're related. What I intuitively want to think is that dukkha is somebody else's fault and it didn't come from me. Or it's some, random event that I happen to experience. But the Buddha is saying, no, maybe not. Why don't you check out whether or not this unhappiness and feeling of not rightness comes from some kind of clinging in me. When you become familiar with it, it becomes easier to understand that it is the desire arising, not necessarily my desire. This is the human condition. This is what we do. So it's a phenomenon that's taking place. Oh, there's the desire, and look what happened. It made the dukkha. It's like, wow, he was right about that. The second noble truth is about recognizing attachment, recognizing craving, seeing that it's linked up to stress and unhappiness. And then what do? The Buddha advice for the second noble truth is that this truth must be penetrated by abandoning the origin of suffering. We have to put it down. We have to recognize it and put it down. What does that feel like? How do you even do that? What does it feel like to put down a thought? What does it feel like to put down an emotion? Or even a material object? Sometimes when I'm pondering this, I pick something up and put it down and just feel it. Well, I know what this feels like. What's it feel like to put down a thought? How do I even do that? They pop back up again. How many times do I have to put down a thought for it to be put down? Or, I've noticed that putting down an emotion, that can take a lot longer. If you have stress hormones going in your body, your body has to take them apart before it can put them down. So sometimes, if I know that I'm trying to let go of an emotion that's already got my body ramped up, I know that it's going to be a while, and I should just do some loving kindness practice, because it's going to be a couple hours before that's all taken apart and I can rest a little bit more. So this noble truth has been penetrated by abandoning the origin of suffering. So recognizing, it happened. I did put it down and it didn't pop back up again. And that's what that feels like. I can do that. But again, such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing, and light that arose in me. I wrote that backwards. Here's how it really goes. Such was the vision, insight, knowing, wisdom, and light that arose in me. Why did I notice that? Because in my mind, it's a sequence where you have the vision of something and then you recognize, here's a possibility. Maybe I haven't done it yet, but it's possible at least. And then the insight comes with, this is how I could do it. And then what happens? You practice it and then you start, even on an intellectual level, this can be done, but it's not yet part of your very being. And then you keep working with it and it becomes you and it flows out of you naturally. That's the wisdom part. And then comes the lightness, the enlightenment, the realization. It's part of who you are. That's the sequence he experienced and says that we can experience. And in fact, you have experienced that in small ways, right? It's something we can develop. The third noble truth, cessation. This one, I think, is revolutionary. That suffering can end. We look at in the world and we see suffering and we think, nope, not going to end. Not for any of those people and not for me either. That's just how it is. But that's not what the Buddha said. He said, this suffering can end. What is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering? It is the remainderless fading. That means when it goes away, gone. Remainderless fading and cessation of that same craving. The cessation of the cause of the suffering. The rejecting, relinquishing, leaving, and renouncing it. He adds this little bit at the end because it's not that easy to do. And it's actually, you have to go through some steps for it to happen. You have to say, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want this to be a part of my life. Even though craving can seem very appealing, like catching it and saying, no, that leads to that, and I don't want that, so I don't want this anymore. And then you have to let go of it. And then you have to not pick it up again. And then you have to say, I'm not going to do that anymore. Take some work for cessation. Life can be filled with freedom, ease, and joy. This noble truth must be penetrated by realizing the cessation of suffering, realizing it, experiencing it. We have to experience cessation. It's important to really look at cessation and get to know it in the same way, with that same attention that we've looked at suffering, and the same meticulous attention that we looked at craving. But it's hard to do. it's almost like looking at negative space or remembering to look at what you've forgotten, right? To see something when it's not there. Much easier to walk into a room and see a new sofa than to walk into a room and realize the picture's not on the wall. And we keep forgetting to pay attention to endings, because as soon as the discomfort stops, then the next thing catches our attention. And we forget to go back and notice, oh, this is how we did this, this is what I learned, and look, something's not there. Much harder. But to really appreciate impermanence, we have to be aware of the whole cycle. We have to stay with something all the way until it ends, and then really experience and get to know, what does it feel like when it's gone? It's a process. What is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering? It is the remainderless fading and cessation of that same craving, the rejecting, relinquishing, leaving, and renouncing of it. This noble truth must be penetrated by realizing the cessation of suffering. When something has ceased, we have an opportunity to experience nirodha, emptiness, non-attachment, reality. The third noble truth invites us to really look into endings, to consciously experience the ending of what arises, and then to rest there, in that not knowing, in that open, curious place that's poised to meet the world. And out of that place grows beginner's mind. That open, curious mind, not controlled by habit and preconceived ideas. It's that growth out of the resting in that spaciousness. Out of that place of cessation comes openness and wonder and curiosity that allows us to meet this life, to be free of preconceptions and biases and habits, to respond to what we meet with clarity and with wisdom. So, dukkha, discomfort, dis-ease needs to be understood. Clinging, put down. Endings, cessation, experienced. Sneak preview of another talk. The Eightfold Path, he says it needs to be developed. That's just really interesting to me, developed. Understood, put down, experienced. So, ending, let's pay attention to this ending. This talk is ending, and my wish for all of you, we've practiced this weekend together, and we practiced well together. It was a very still, quiet zendo. And my wish for all of you is that you continue practicing, and that you continue practicing with the clarity of intention and with the energy that you practiced this weekend or this morning. And that you all look with careful attention at your life and infuse it with this beginner's mind that we developed this weekend. Thank you.